I'm not aware of what youth guarantee is.
The Youth Guarantee aims to ensure that all young people under the age of 25 years receive a good quality offer of employment, continuing education, or traineeship, and all those within a period of 4 months of becoming unemployed or formally finishing their education.
Wow, that sounds amazing. It would be really nice to have a specialty just waiting for me when I finish. That sounds really good.
So thanks for coming, and let's start the second session, second panel of Bridge Forum, which is an initiative of the Albanian NGO, The Bridge, dedicated to intercultural dialogue in the region, and also especially to one of our special focuses is the problems of youth in the Western Balkans. This is the first session, which we had 1.5 months ago. It was about youth and economic problems. This one is related to the previous, so they are like communicating vessels, and it is a very worrying problem. But before going to this, I would mention that and would thank for the support the EU-funded Western Balkan Youth project of the Regional Cooperation Council, and also the support, the cooperation that we are having from ISEC, the International Students Association, and which students mostly of economics, but who view economic science from a humanistic angle, and also they are dedicated to committed to intercultural dialogue and to the mutual knowledge among nations. Now, this is let me first mention, before giving the floor to the participants that we have here, let me mention some data which show how important is this issue, this phenomenon of brain draining and youth immigration in our region. 61% of young people in Western Balkans are considering living and working abroad. 61%. By 2020, more than 4.6 million people have left the Western Balkans. And between 2012 and 2019, the working age population in the Western Balkans declined nearly 7% due to low birth rates, population aging, and migration. About the problems of brain draining, we have invited here two panelists. First is Marija Krstevska, who is president of the National Youth Council of North Macedonia, the biggest representative body of youth and forms of youth organization in that country. Now she is holding a scholarship about human rights in Columbia University in New York, while the other panelist is Agon Maliqi, a policy analyst, civil society activist, and media writer. His interests include also regional and international affairs, human rights and democracy in the Balkans, and social economic development in Kosovo. Now, I would give the floor first to Marija Krstevska, having about 20 minutes, so that we could have time also for the questions and answers of the attendants, because feedback that we had for the previous panel was that they wished to have more dialogue with the panelists. So we would leave a bit more time today. So please, Marija.
Okay, thank you very much, Ashkin. Hello, everyone, or good afternoon. I think that it's already late afternoon in the countries where you are. I'm joining from another time zone, currently in Miami, Florida. And it's a pleasure to be here, because when it comes to youth and youth issues, it's always a pleasure to discuss, although it's not always so positive things to say, of course. But as you already introduced me, I'm the president of the National Youth Council of Macedonia. So I'll start by saying that migration has been happening for a long time now and will continue to happen, of course. But brain drain specifically is a phenomenon that has been discussed a lot lately in our region. And although the youth organizations are conducting surveys and pointing out already over the years that young people want to leave the country, the census that we had recently in North Macedonia, last year actually, is just proving this, that young people are leaving the country every day more and more. But as many things in life, I would say, when looked through from different perspectives, they gave different effects, of course. So if we look from an individual viewpoint, migration has also positive effects, because it's always striving for something better. Young people or anyone that leave, that migrate to another country, they do it because they want a better salary, a better education, better life standards, etc. If we look at it from a global viewpoint, migration processes can also be positive, especially because they help to properly allocate human capital, and with that general wealth and efficiency rise. So that's contributing to a global growth, which is also a positive thing. But on the other hand, if we look at it from local and national viewpoint, the migration of qualified and highly qualified people, or in other words, the brain drain, is a loss to the community. So brain drain, or more specifically, the migration of young people, is widely recognized as an urgent challenge in North Macedonia, the country where I come from, but also in the whole Western Balkan region. We continue to lose every day a significant portion of future leaders, of professionals, of future entrepreneurs, and many other professions. All the data that we have about brain drain is collected by the civil society sector. I have to point out that there is not a complete analysis of the impact of the migration. There is lack of reliable and detailed data. For example, the exact number of people that are leaving, the length of their stay abroad, their gender, age, or any other characteristic, their level of education, the exact motives of why they are leaving. So these data are missing, and there are no solid administrative sources for this. This shows that the governments in the region are not paying enough attention to this phenomenon that is emptying the countries in the region, in the Balkans. So not only they're not using the administrative resources to find out the exact data and thus the roots of this problem, they are not also listening to the recommendations that have been given from the civil society sector throughout the years, and of course not acting upon it. In North Macedonia, as I already mentioned, finally we had a census after 20 years. The data was collected last September, and the results were shown last month. So I can share some key findings from this, although not very positive though. They just prove that what has been told by the researchers conducted in all those previous years. So if I compare the results from the census done in 2002 and the one done last year, so which is almost 20 years distance, I can share that we have around 185,000 inhabitants fewer. So people are leaving the country, and that's a fact. On one hand, we do have more people that are elder people above 80 years old. In fact, those are almost 140,000 more compared to 2002. But when it comes to youth, which are considered to be on the age from 15 to 29 years old, the number has been decreased by around 154,000. Additionally, there are around 100,000 people that were young in 2002, and now those people would be around between 35 and 49 years old, but they left the country. It means that around 20% of the people that were young in the category of the youth in 2002 have already left the country. So it's a fact that Macedonian population is becoming old, because in 2002, young people made up 23.8 of the total population. And now, as a result of the brain drain, this number is decreased to 17.8% young people compared to the total population nowadays. And if we see the definition by for old countries by Eurostat, we can see that definitely Macedonia is becoming an old country, because the definition is that those countries with less than 4 residents who are able to work, meaning from 15 to 64 years old, per one person in retirement, which is more than 65 years old, those countries are old countries. And we have less than 4. It's 3.84, I believe now. So it's less than 4, which means that we are becoming indeed an old country. But let's talk about the reasons why young people are leaving the country. As I said, all the research has been done by the civil society sector. So I will just mention some. I'll start with one that was done for the National Youth Council, and I have been personally involved in this research. It was done together with Nevanti Group for USA in 2019. It's called Cross-Sectoral Youth Assessment in North Macedonia. I was conducting different focus groups, and the question was why young people are leaving the country. So I can just read briefly a summary that shows some of the reasons why young people are leaving the country, and then later on I will elaborate furthermore on some of them. So it says, youth are acutely aware that the country has an outdated education system, as well as high rates of unemployment and underemployment. Deeply rooted patterns of corruption and state capture undermine young people's confidence in their government and their willingness and interest to participate in shaping the future of the country. Young people tend to live at home even into their late 20s, and with limited physical spaces to engage socially. Spend an average of 6 hours a day on social media. All of these factors appear to contribute to low-grade feelings of exclusion and depression, which are more significant for groups that have been traditionally marginalized: Roma, young people living with disability, and LGBT youth. So I'll try, as I said, to explore further some of these reasons. And I would say that the first reason why young people are leaving the countries would be economic motives. The mentioned research, shows that lack of well-paying jobs was the most often cited reason for youth out-migration. Youth is among the most vulnerable groups in our society when it comes to employment. The average regional youth unemployment rate is 35%, and Macedonia is not much different from the regional average rate. Although it's starting to be reduced, but still in the second quarter of last year, in 2021, youth unemployment in Macedonia was 28.3%. Besides this, many young people work illegally, have fixed-term contracts, receive a lower salary than others, and work in more precarious positions, which shows us also different side of the bad economic situation. So I can say that higher salaries and better employment possibilities are often among the answers of young people when asked why they are leaving and why they would leave the country. Something that is worth mentioning here is also the non-compliance in the labor market, which means the kind of stuff that is produced and what is demanded on the labor market is not balanced. In a bit older publication from the International Labour Organization, the data show that the average of 31 months or even more is passing from graduation to first job for young people. And it's even higher for youth with no tertiary degree. I would not discuss much the economic motives because I know that those are very obvious on one hand, and then I know that the previous forum was specifically on this, so you touched upon it back then. And in the interest of the time and not to be repetitive, I'll just move on to other reasons. So that being said, I would mention that the second reason why young people are leaving the regions, and especially North Macedonia, is the low quality of education. And this has been pointed out in all the researches so far, and I can say that it's not a simple problem. Here I can mention why low quality of education, because we have an aging infrastructure, outdated materials and equipment, teachers and professors are underpaid, employment in schools is on basis of political affiliation, many diplomas can be bought. The public education system doesn't stimulate critical thinking, and I can say, as a person involved in the NGO sector for many years, what is devastating is that the soft skills can be acquired through formal education. I can say that Macedonian education in all phases almost continuously has been a subject to reforms since the country's independence until today. So in these 30 years, there is devastating fact that in the 30 years since the independence, we have had 19 ministers for education and science. So this is really frightening. The average time that a minister remains in the office is about a year and a half, which is of course not enough for a meaningful and quality reform and change. Adding to this, I can say that the allocations for education and training from the budget of the Republic of North Macedonia are quite low. They're around like 3 or 3.3% of the GDP. This is data from 2020. And it's also worrying that the results of international student tests are very bad. We are always ranked among the last countries on the list. So I can say that the shortcomings in the education system, of course, result in lower employability of young people who face problems in entering the labor market. Thus, often the response of young people to the dysfunction of education and the labor market is that they are emigrating, they're leaving the country. Although I can say that worth mentioning here is one good practice for solving this problem, and that is the dual education model that started recently in North Macedonia. Through dual education, according to the German model that has been modified, young people during their education acquire knowledge and skills needed in the labor market, and companies, on the other hand, get ready professional staff who will be able to respond later on to the work tasks. But however, this is still in a pilot version. It's not available in all the cities. It's not available to all the students, and it started in September 2018. So the first results would be seen this year when the first generation will finish. I saw in the videos in the beginning before we started that youth guarantee was mentioned, so that's another, but maybe later on we can discuss this. So I'll just move on to the third reason why young people are leaving the country, and I would say that that's because the young people are not satisfied with their position in the society. And this has also been shown through the many researches that has been done, and I will mention here some of the findings from the research done by the Westminster Foundation for Democracy and the Youth Educational Forum. There are two, one done in 2019 and one in 2021. It's about socio-political participation of youth in North Macedonia. So this research shows, the last one in 2021 showed that 58% of young people would move out of Republic of North Macedonia if given the opportunity, and only 6.9 would return back. So basically every second person or even more would leave the country. Vashkim shared in the beginning that in the region this percentage is 61, so it's the same, I would say, in all the countries. here around 60%, which is really, really a lot. Further on, to share some data from this research is that 80% of young people said that the authorities do not care about them at all, or just partially care about their needs and problems. Later on, this was again proven that many people, in fact, 68% of young people expressed that the authorities are not even familiar with their problems. So that leads with dissatisfaction of young people. Then young people are not consulted. This also are results from the survey that high 85% of young people have never been consulted, neither on local, neither on central level. And it's actually even worse for people with disability. It says that 9 out of 10 people have never been included or consulted by institutions in decision-making processes. Of course, this leads of young people being skeptical and thinking that they cannot impact the way how authorities work. It's 6 out of 10 people that believe in this. And again, the situation is much worse for young people with disability. These researchers are also showing that many young people are inactive. So the last research showed that 71% of young people who participated in this survey described themselves as socially inactive citizens, so not engaged in any way. So I would pose here a rhetorical question: is the government doing something to encourage youth participation? I would say not much, and certainly not enough. Experiences from the past show that after some time, governments often lose the momentum to tackle youth issues or simply forget about them. The recent research, and I believe this maybe would be the last one that I will mention, was done by the National Youth Council of Macedonia about the implementation on the law on youth participation and youth policies, and shows that youth and youth organizations are not a priority of the state institutions and the municipalities, given the fact that after 2 years since the adoption of the law on youth participation and youth policies, many of the mechanisms that are envisioned in the law have not yet been implemented. So municipalities are showing very little interest in implementing this legal obligation. Just to give you a bigger picture of it, the law is requiring every municipality to have a local youth center, to have a local youth council, to establish a youth center and support it, to have a local youth strategy, to appoint youth officer in every municipality and on state level in every institution, then to have a youth office in every municipality. And the results are showing that local youth councils are established in only 10 municipalities, which is only 12% of the total municipalities. The total number is 80 or 81, including the city of Skopje. According to the data, there are only 7 municipalities that have conducted consultations for the local youth strategy, and only 11 municipalities have adopted youth strategy, which is 14%. And then there are many municipalities where the local youth strategy is already outdated, but sometimes even if it's not outdated, it's not being implemented. It's just a document, a paper in a drawer, and without action plan for implementation, without budget dedicated for its implementation. So speaking about the action plan, this monitoring done by the National Youth Council of Macedonia showed that only 6 municipalities answered that they have developed an action plan. Out of 81, as I said. Youth office was established in only 11 municipalities, which is again only 14% of municipalities. And when it comes to youth centers, they are open in 8 municipalities, but only 3 of them are according to the quality standards of youth center that was adopted by the Agency on Youth and Sports. The rest have been open before and are not supported by the municipality as it is envisioned in the law. So as you could hear, 14 was the maximum, the highest that I mentioned, the percentage of municipalities that have fulfilled this requirement. So maximum was 11 out of 81 municipalities. Bigger number can only be seen when it comes to youth officers. So far, 53 youth officers have been appointed on the from the state institutions, and from the municipalities is 56, so it's around 69%. But even though youth officers' appointments are actually appointment of a person that is already working in the institution. So it's not a new job opportunity. And even though it's not fulfilled 100%. Another thing that here should be questioned, of course, is the criteria for appointing, and are those 69, 70% that are already appointed, are they appointed because of their skills and knowledge or background in the field of youth policies, or any other criteria? I mentioned 3 reasons, but very briefly, as a bonus, I would mention additional reasons to those 3. I will kind of sum up many problems in one, and I would say a reason why young people are living in the region is poor quality of life. Because even if a young person manages to have good quality education, I don't know, maybe somewhere abroad or maybe in the private schools, and they have, let's say, a well-paid job and are very active in participating in the socio-political life in the country, they still would face a lot of problems in our society, starting from air pollution, lack of infrastructure, dysfunctional health system, then through corruption and broader dysfunctions of the system, like nepotism, absence of meritocracy, absence of rule of law, impunity, social issues, and exclusion, as I mentioned, especially for people with disability, then partisanship, selective justice, lack of cross-sectoral approach and interinstitutional cooperation. And I think that I can continue on and on for many more. And that's the reason why young people are not trusting the institutions, and other research is showing that high 83% of young people are not trusting the institutions. So everything that I said, all these reasons are blamed, of course, for feeling the insecurity of young people, and are push factors for leaving the country for a better place. I think I would stop here in order to have more time for the other speaker and for discussions. So thank you very much for listening. I hope that some of this data have been useful, or maybe you can, the people that are coming from the other countries in the region can recognize similarity, and who knows, maybe we can find some solutions together.
Thank you, Maria, for your very clarifying presentation. And now I would leave the floor to another young scholar and also social activist, Agon Maliqi. Let me say that for us, when we say that our organization, youth is one of the main focuses, it's not a paternalistic attitude. We are trying to involve young people and to hear their voice, and to further the dialogue between young people from the region, and also to learn from them. Please, Agon, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bashkim, and thank you for calling me young. At 38, I'm already, by all definitions, no definition puts 38 into young, but I accept the term. You know, I will discuss today more from a policy perspective and broader regional perspective. So I've worked, and we continue to work with youth through our civil society organizations, Bunkar, which I'm the chairman of the board of, but my work has recently mostly focused on regional developments related to politics, development, but also political risk and security. And migration keeps coming up as one of the top issues. The Balkans has been always a hotspot for discussions on, for conflict themes, also for issues of development. But this demographic hemorrhage has become now a major concern, not just locally, but also for international partners of the Balkans. Migration from the Western Balkans, but also all the other parts of Eastern Europe has been a normal phenomenon. It's been it for a long time. People from more poorer parts of Europe going to richer parts, getting jobs, getting skilled, some of them coming back. But there is something to this new wave, especially in the Balkans, that has more reasons, raises more reasons for concern. I'll try to be brief and structure my comment into three basic sections. One, I'll talk about what are the motivations, and I'll try not to repeat maybe what was already said by Marija in the first talk. She gave a lot of interesting statistics and data. The second, I'll talk about what are the consequences of this new outward migration. But also I'd like to be optimistic and maybe look at also the opportunities, because migration is not just it's not just the bad story. There's some positive elements to it. I'll start with the motivations by talking about, there's a lot of talk about the economic concerns being the main driver or dissatisfaction with political institutions. But let's focus a little bit on the economy. There is some question as to how much that is really a driver. Like if you look at the polls, obviously, the youth all over the region, the polls say they're unsatisfied with jobs, with the economy. But there was a poll done by IRI 2 years ago, International Republican Institute. So, and I found a bit of a paradox throughout the region by looking through the data there, is that, everybody is, there's a huge disproportion between people who are complaining about the economy. But when they're asked, what are the social and economic conditions in their own homes, much less people complain about their own personal economic situation. But when they talk about the situation generally, they express more grievances and more concerns. So there's a bit of a paradox here, which I feel is important to understand. And I think that this migration wave, it has a lot of genuine grievances, genuine concern, genuine frustration, genuine desires for, but I think there is a layer there of this, what I call Balkan fatalism. And I wrote a piece on Balkan Insight on this, on how this Balkan fatalism or fatalism is sort of, risks becoming a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. And you look at the polls that, even in some countries where there's more optimism about the future. For example, in the region, I think in Kosovo and Serbia, there was, are a bit, more optimistic. Even there, the younger people are even more pessimistic than the youth. And I think it has to do a lot with expectation. There's a bit of a ahistoric outlook. And there's a wonderful book by Marija Krstevska and Stephen Holmes, that was written 2 years ago, and they talk about this phenomenon not just being part of the Balkans, but across Eastern Europe, of these, they call it the dictatorship of comparison. So people are not just judging, they might not be that bad economically at home, but they compare that with what they see in the West. So so they have this idea that it's not about what you have, it's about what you can have. So so it's more of that pull factor of wanting to get to those Western standards fast, rather than being in such a hard and economically deprived context at home. This is also sort of this comparative mindset. This is also closely related to mistrust in political change. So the trust in institutions and in politics is very low. So for a lot of youth, the motivation is do I wait, and do I gamble all of my youth and my life by waiting for that kind of standard to come in the Balkans, or do I just exit? And a lot of people are choosing exit. They don't have the patience, the time to wait. So what they're looking at and they're comparing in the West, not necessarily this new wave of migration. It's not necessarily, basic things like jobs, but more like advanced democracy kind of standards, like healthcare, good urban, planning, environmental standards. So it's no longer just about the economy, but they don't have the patience to wait and risk their lives. I mean, spend their youth and their sort of their best years, but they choose this exit. But even when in cases where there is political optimism, for example, in Kosovo, you have now, with the change in government a year earlier, you have this popular government, this wave of political optimism. Even in the cases of political optimism, the desire for migration does not drop, which suggests that the problem is also structural. It goes just beyond what I said. This mistrust in institutions and politics. It's just that our economies are still so underdeveloped in a lot of cases, and they cannot absorb, especially in Kosovo's case, they cannot absorb the huge amount of youth that come into the labor market. So a part of them has to go. But this is not to minimize the genuine frustrations and concerns that Marija very articulately elaborated of, people not being listened to, institutions not being responsive. I think there's another very important dimension to highlight. It's the pull factor, and I think a lot of European countries have done had a very negative role, particularly countries like Germany, by designing specific programs that are sucking away talent from the region. Specifically targeting skilled workers. And I think by doing that, they are effectively stealing human capital that Balkan countries have built. Our countries have invested a lot of money in educating all these skilled workers and, providing healthcare for them. And now, just preparing workers for the German labor market. And I think this is an issue that our countries should raise. With Germany, I'm not saying they should stop migration, but I think that there needs to be a little bit of consideration of the consequences that this is causing in the region. And I'll stop here and I'll list 3 consequences. First, I think the migration waves, the most recent one, is kind of depleting the countries of exactly the kind of scarce human capacity that we need to develop, to move into higher value-added economic sectors and to deliver better public services. So it's stealing away exactly the kind of workers we need to move into those Western standards. And so we risk not having any more absorption capacity for new investment. Even if investors are coming, they're unable to find the kind of workers they need to come into our region. Secondly, I think there's a very important political consequence of the migration wave, and this has been the case in countries like Poland, Hungary, or even Romania. Migration can deplete these countries, our countries, of voters who are most inclined to support democratic reforms. By getting these more talented, more skilled, more educated, urban voters, and leaving more older generations, more conservative population in their own countries, they also produce more illiberal regimes, more conservative countries. So in a way, it also has a negative impact on democracy, which is also one of the criteria that we need to access or join Western institutions. Thirdly, I think in this context of struggling economies and this context where migration also entrenches authoritarianism, I think this also increases security risks. The Balkans we have a lot of these bilateral and ethnic disputes, and this adds further tension to those disputes by, as I said, by making the countries more authoritarian, less developed, and hence, whenever we have these economic and democratic crises, they tend to explode mostly on ethnic conflict. So I think this dimension should not be neglected. And I'd like to end on the positive note of what are the opportunities. Sometimes it's better. It's hard to say this, but if you have economic contexts where youth do not have opportunities to develop properly, sometimes it's great for them to go abroad, get educated, and get skills in the workplace environment, and a lot of them will come back. And that's a net benefit for society. Like there was even some studies in the case of Albania, for example, that were done by the Harvard team, Ricardo Hausmann, of the positive impact, for example, that the return of migrants from Greece and Italy during the crisis in Greece and Italy almost 10 years ago, who came back to Albania, because those countries were in crisis, and a lot of skilled migrants came back with a lot of capital, money and skills that they could better use in Albania than in Greece or Italy, which were in crisis. And there's a visible economic impact of those skilled workers. If you go to Tirana now, how much it has improved. For example, the restaurant scene, the food and the agriculture sector has really benefited from the skills of these migrants who have returned. So the migrants also create a lot of new connections. They go abroad, they get connected to value chains, to companies, and then they can use these connections to outsource or some of the production facilities back in the Balkans. You see this a lot in Kosovo, for example. Now, we have a large diaspora that works, for example, in Switzerland and Germany in the construction sector. And what they're doing is that they're becoming a bridge, and then, because they know people in their home country and they find suppliers, and they're now moving some of the production processes in Kosovo, in their villages, to their families. And sort of creating that development that we need. So, the challenge now will be to make this migration circular. And this is the biggest challenge in the Balkans. There are positive signs also with this phenomenon that is called now nearshoring. After COVID, a lot of the production, there's this talk now of decoupling the economy from China, for example, in the West. COVID has shown that the globalized economy cannot, sustain these kind of big shocks. So the West is bringing in closer to home, sometimes even in their own countries, for example, in the US or in European countries, they're bringing manufacturing back. But they're also bringing it in some less developed countries that are nearer to Europe. And there's a huge opportunity now for the Balkans to do this. And there are already some signs that a lot of the companies that are moving some processes from China, India, and these faraway countries where there can be very big disruptions of supply, moving them closer, and the Balkans are like at the gate or within Europe, or at the gate of the European Union, but within Europe. There are also new opportunities emerging from the new digital economy. A lot of the, there's a change in the work culture now, where it doesn't matter where you are to work. And a lot of skilled people are coming into, so Balkan countries have to become attractive also to attract not just Balkan populations, but also foreigners. Especially if you're Mediterranean or like Montenegro or Albania and you have a seaside, you can also get new workers and have sort of migrants come to our countries, where they can pay for less taxes and have more and sort of pay lower prices for products and get the kind of salaries and benefits that they can get in the West. And I think there will also be, and the last but not least, migration also creates some positive political change. We've seen that sometimes diaspora, in some cases in the Balkans, can be more nationalistic and regressive, but in a lot of cases, it can also help produce change, democratic change, especially when it's engaged in voting, because they're less connected to the political structures at home. They're more free. So they by sending in money, but most importantly, by kind of living in these Western advanced democracies, they develop new concepts about democracy. They see how proper democracies work, and they kind of transmit that knowledge, and they raise these political expectations. So the story of migration, it has a lot of risks, especially if the skilled workers keep leaving. The challenge now is how to make this more circular, how to create better living conditions, especially in bigger cities and small towns, services like health and education, good schools for kids. These are the concerns that is driving the middle classes, the 30-plus-year-olds, to leave abroad and decide not to risk and stay in the Balkans. And I think this should be the message that is transmitted to political elites and to any decision maker and stakeholder in our political and social processes. So I'll end there and leave it open for discussion. So thank you.
Thank you, Agon, for your intervention. It was very interesting, and also especially that what you mentioned, that this circular movement benefits of coming back. Well, it would be more fruitful if more people could come, and the factor that would influence in this, I think, is to revert the phenomena, to overcome what the factors that made them leave the country. Now, I would not make more comments. I would invite the attendants to ask questions. I hope they will have. There are also many more people that are following us streaming in YouTube, but I expect from you people who are, the young people that are attending us and are here, that could ask questions to the panelists. Anyway, yes, Jelena Bratic, please.
Hello. So I wanted to ask you, you mentioned quite a few times that young people and youth is actually in a focus of everyone's work. I would say also like the government work and the activists and everything. But do you think that's actually the case? Because we have so many young people leaving the country, and you also mentioned, Marija, you talked about North Macedonia and the scenario in your country. So do you actually think that youth is in a focus of everyone's work, and that the well-being and the great like quality of work with youth is promised with from the government and other organizations?
Can I go? Or the first
let's go in the order of the presentation.
Yeah, I didn't know if the first part was for Agon or not.
I mean, it was the question for both of you and for everyone here in the poll.
Okay, thank you. Well, let me go, because I was not sure if the first part was for Agon, because in my presentation, I mentioned that young people are not satisfied, are not consulted, are very skeptical. And of course, that they think, majority of them think that the government and all the institutions is not even aware of the youth problems and youth needs. So I don't think that everybody is, that youth are priorities. When it comes to the civil society sector, yes, definitely. But when it comes to the government and all the institutions, I would say not, or even when it is, it's not really meaningful, because we are aware that yes, youth are being mentioned in all the political campaigns and especially before elections, and we hear a lot of promises, but then when it comes to the reality and real work, I don't think that young people are a priority, unfortunately, of course.
I mean, it's a broad and general question. It depends on the context, the country, the specific environment, or the actor. Obviously, it's a broader problem of democracy. It's not just youth that are not heard. It's and I agree with Marija. I mean, it's obviously there's a problem with accountability in general. It's a lot of other marginalized groups, vulnerable groups, and it has to do with degree of political power also. So I think the context where youth is more heard is where youth is more able to mobilize and advocate more. I can talk about the context of Kosovo. You could see in Kosovo case, it's also because of demographic structure. There's much more youth in the overall population. We just have a very, very young population. So when you have numerically more youth, they are more heard in the overall population. And they also drive change more because youth are more energetic, and they played a very important role. Like youth and women drove a lot of the political changes that happened over the past years. So it has to do with political power. So youth are heard as much as they are voicing, I think, their concerns and are being active. In general, I don't think they are being heard. I don't think, but that's fairly common, and this unresponsiveness, towards gender issues, towards poverty issues, towards if you don't have, if you're not the voices that are heard are those that have economic power and that can dictate developments. Where youth is heard is, as Marija mentioned, civil society, but also I think a lot of the, especially donor community, development agencies, who study the region and look at what the problems are and what the challenges are. I think increasingly they understand and see that youth concerns and outward migration and brain drain is a major concern. So I hope that kind of answers your question. Thank you.
Yes, it does. Thank you so much.
Any other question, please? Mario Merdani, please.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
A bit louder, please.
I believe it should be a bit better now.
Yes, now it's fine.
Okay, so I heard it being treated as an economical in the economical aspect, and in the political aspect, the migration and the brain drain of youth. But is it seen, or has it been taken into consideration as cultural factors? I know that in Albania we've had, for the past years, we've had massive internal migrations. People moving from city to city due to opportunities that were being fairly central, mainly concentrated in the central cities. So do you think that has happened through the entire region, and that of course there are cultural clashes, and a massive migration such as Albania has seen is fairly difficult, if not impossible, for the existing communities to adapt and to maybe absorb? So do you think that could be a reason, or there's no data, no correlation to be drawn there? Thanks. That's for everyone.
Marija, do you want to go first, or?
It's okay, I can start. Well, regarding this internal migration from one place to another, especially from rural to urban area, it's definitely happening throughout the years. And also the census that I mentioned is showing some of this. Like, we have some of the municipalities that are literally emptied, some municipalities that there are no young people. But for me, what I can say here, I would mention that I don't see really a problem in this internal migration. I don't even see a problem, as Agon was saying, when young people are leaving just because they see better opportunities abroad, whether education or employment. And that can be something really beneficial for the country itself if they come back. But the problem is when young people are leaving, they're getting skills, competencies, they are qualified people that our countries need them, but they never come back. So I see problem when our governments in the region are not doing anything to bring those people back. I can share, especially for my country, I know that young people that have been, for example, financed and supported by our governments to study in some of the prestigious universities around the world, they have never been contacted later on from the government. They have never been offered an job opportunity, for example, or any other opportunity, so they can be they could be attracted to come back and invest what they gain in the country. So I see problem in this. Agon, if you have something to say.
Sure. I mean, it's just, I think the internal migration is also an important phenomenon. You see all over the Balkans, this heavy concentration of the populations in capital cities, basically becoming, the country is becoming, one, kind of cluster economies. Like, there's one part of the country where there's like, high development, and then the rest is really struggling. And I think it's a, in that case, that's a clearly economic choice, because of incomes, because the economies are developing in kind of services, tourism, the kind of, it's a purely more economic choice. I think in the outward migration, the difference is broader. The concerns and demands are higher. So it's not just jobs. It's, as I mentioned earlier, it's standards of certain things. So expectations are different. It's health, education, the kind of things that middle-class families especially are worried about. And then also this issue of, then maybe, as I said, there's a little bit of cultural element here. That's why I mentioned fatalism. I think there is something in the Balkans that is a bit more specific in this fatalism, in this mistrust that it will ever be well here, and the reason why I think it's not only had to do with economics but also psychology is Croatia, for example. Take a look at Croatia. Croatia is much more advanced, not much more, but considerably more advanced economically than it's going more. It's done better also politically. It's joined the EU. The whole Balkans were about we will be developed, and when we enter the EU, everything will be fine. But Croatia is also experiencing a massive outward migration of skilled workers. They're running out of doctors as well. So how does one explain that? It's not about lack of jobs. It's not about even good salaries. It's not about the bad economy. It's about, I guess, people demanding even more and more, and really, being unable to wait, and to understand how development, how it happens. I think this opens up, I'm not competent to go into that area, not just because I don't have the proper data, but also I think this requires some, sociologists, anthropologists, I guess, I don't know, who would be able to make some of these interpretations on the cultural and psychological dimensions. Social psychologists, I guess.
If I may add just this reminded me that in Maria's question, there was this cultural aspect. I would say what the problem is, and maybe we didn't tackle that enough, is exactly this cultural and social stigma towards, for example, LGBT people, towards people with disability, I don't know, or these stereotypes that are existing in the Balkans, especially regarding the role of women, for example. So all these things are indeed a huge push factor, because people are seeing, especially those who had a chance to travel abroad and see how is it in other countries, they find it more safe maybe, or I don't know, like better, as I mentioned in the beginning. It's just fleeing the country, but going for something better. And of course, this cultural aspect can be a major factor here as well. So thank you, Maria, for mentioning that as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you both to Maria and Agon, and thank you also to Mario Nardini for the interesting question, and also for a parallel that he made about inner migration and immigration outside the emigration outside the country. Maybe if we see the factors that make people leave their village or their small town and go to larger spaces, to larger towns. This should, of course, it's not a problem, as Maria said, because it still remains within one country, but it can be useful perhaps to understand the factors that why people leave their own country. And also for, I thank Mario about mentioning the cultural factors to which somehow Agon gave an answer. Quite interesting, and I would think this is quite thought-provoking. Any other question, please? People are following us live. Much more people. Well, then maybe I will refer to some questions that we received before the panel today. First, let me, before I put a question, Claire Hassan-Beliou is asking to put a question, please.
Hi, my name is Claire. So I am myself a student coming from abroad. Well, I'm from Albania. I went abroad to study and then I came back again to Albania, and I'm kind of an example of this kind of idea of brain draining and immigration, etc. And honestly, like I feel like from my personal experience, like it's very mixed, the experience that I have, because there are so many people who are like so against this idea that why are the youth going abroad to study, work, etc., etc. And at the same time, there are people who are asking me like, why did you come back if there was better abroad? And I think that living in Eastern Europe, it's kind of very typical for us to know that Western has better universities, better standard of living, higher wages and everything. So it means that whatever knowledge we would get from living somewhere where there is a higher standard, bringing that back home would make a big improvement in the culture, in infrastructure, in education, or even monetary. Because even though I was a student, for example, I also had like the opportunity to come back home and bring to home something new, something different, and help in something. So for me, I am very 50-50 when we get to this topic, because I think it's great for everyone to have the opportunity to choose to go abroad, for the youth to get experience from a different country and follow their passions, and also at the same time maybe not to consider it so much as brain draining, because if we look at the statistics, there is a high percentage of students that study abroad and they still come back and work in their country. Is that a good investment? If we're gonna look at the number of how many students go get this good education, because if you're gonna go and study in Harvard and come back and work in Albania, if we're gonna compare a university which is like the 5,000 on the scale for how good the qualification, the quality of education is, and compare it to one student from Harvard who probably came back here and brought this knowledge here, that probably it's worth it, because it's in a way some type of exchange. And I'm pro-globalism in a way, because as we are going abroad, there are more people coming here, I believe. My question is this something that can change? Is this something that is going to be a topic of discussion for a long time? Probably yes, unless the education here in Albania increases the equality and we can start comparing to the very high quality universities as others, even though there are some really good universities, but it's a very tricky topic, I would say. Anyways, this was my experience and my idea about this. I hope I have given something from my experience.
Vashkin, you're muted.
Please. Please, Maria.
Yes. Well, thank you, Clea, for sharing your experience. And I'm glad that you decided to go back in your country and invest all your knowledge and your gain experience there. I would say for me, you're a rare example because I have many other examples from young people that I know that went somewhere but never came back, or they're not even having an intention for coming back. So regarding your question, is this something that is going to change or we are still going to talk about it? I'm afraid that we are still going to talk about this for years and years, because it's not something that is solvable that easily. You focused on the education aspect and education reason why young people are leaving, and even if we focus only on that reason, it will require, I guess, years and years to improve. As I shared all this data about the education system in Macedonia, so it's not only one thing, it's many things, many issues that are causing this low quality of education. Yeah, that's only one reason, and we already spoke about many other reasons. So there is still a lot much work to do to improve all these things and all these aspects in order to provide to young people, but all citizens, a better quality life in our countries in the region. But I do hope that you will inspire many young people with your story, and that many young people will follow your example and come back and invest and stay in their countries here in the region.
Thank you. Agon, have you anything to add?
No, I mean, it was just a very interesting personal reflections covering quite a lot of the themes that we discussed, or the motivations, the challenges, the factors. So, you know, I just enjoyed listening, and you know, I don't think I would have more to add of value. So, thanks.
Thank you. Any other question? Well, and let me go back to the questions that we received. I suppose that they are from people who are not there to put in the event, but they are following live streaming. We received 4 questions today before the event. The 3 of them were already answered by the panelists. I would only convey only one of these questions. How do you think of brain draining? Is that similar with being realistic, since we need a better life in future, instead trapped in a place we lost our value, or is it a selfish act? Agon, please.
I hesitate to answer these questions because I really think it's always a personal context. You know, I don't think people should judge any migrant or anyone who leaves, make moral judgments on that, because it really depends on the specific context. You know, sometimes it really makes sense to migrate because, you know, for certain sectors, skills, or if, for example, as Maria mentioned, for example, you know, for identity reasons, whether you're part of the LGBT community, a woman, you feel that, you know, the country is suffocating you. I think it's, you know, I don't think we should judge people who want to, you seek more opportunities. But what I think there can be made a case that staying, makes sense, or even return makes sense, because there are a lot of advantages, especially for skilled people. Underdeveloped, less developed countries provide opportunities, to create the kind of things that already exist in the West. In the West, you can be the quite much lower in the food chain of certain industries, sectors, whereas here you can build those things from scratch. You can be a pioneer of new industries. You can, there's much more empty space where you can build things. And it's not as simple. I have a lot of friends who are coming back, for example, and the motivations, not a lot, but I've heard a lot of cases, especially, for example, in countries from like the US, where, certain things like, childcare, health benefits are really scandalous. And, and when you come back to the Balkans, you have much more support networks, whether family or state, so it really depends on the context, on the personal individual context. I do think there are a lot of times where migration makes sense. But I also do think there are a lot of times where migration return sort of into the Balkans really makes sense. And that is really context specific, country specific, and person specific.
Thank you. Marija, anything?
Yeah, well, I don't have much to add. I agree with what Agon said, and definitely I would just emphasize one thing that he already mentioned. It's like, who are we to judge? And I would say, especially if you, government, if you are not providing enough opportunities for young people to remain here, then who are you to judge, or any other people, not only government, but why people are leaving, or why people are not returning, or why people are returning. So I think that we need to focus on all these issues that we mentioned that are reasons why young people are leaving, and to try to find a solution and recommendations that the government and institutions will hear and will start working on. So we need to work, but from the roots of the problems to solve in order to provide better opportunities, and not just look at the results that young people are leaving and judge them why they left.
Okay, thank you. This was very important to stress from both of you, that it's not the individuals who should be judged because they are looking for more opportunities for a better life. And we should discern, we should distinguish what is on individual level and what is as a social phenomenon. That if we want to try to improve the situation, to revert the tendencies, or to stop this all this phenomenon, painful, it should not be by judging the individuals, but trying to see the social, the structural factors, I think. Any other question from the attendants? Okay, so then let us finish with this session. Thank you both Marija and Agon for participating, for your presentations, and also all the other people who were attending and following us, those who made questions, and also those who listened and followed the event. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you, Bashkir. Enjoy the weekend.
You too. Bye.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Bye.